afternoon. It is Super Bowl Sunday, and we have a great episode with you today for everybody. I have a gentleman on here who has a very cool niche in the industry here. He's owned a business in the fly fishing shop for 30 years. He's done a lot of great things. He's connected to a lot of great people. And in my opinion, every time I've had interaction with this guy and people have told me interactions with him, they said he has been nothing but a great guy, and I can testify to that. So I want to welcome Scott Willison to the show. How are you, Scott?
Good. How are you, Paul?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for doing this. Like I was saying, I've had a couple interactions with you. The first time I met you was up at the Spay Clave we had last year up at Rockport.
Yeah.
And everybody was just telling me about you. And I was like, who's this Scott guy? And people are like, oh, that's Scott Willison over there. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And went over and just super easy to approach and just an all around nice guy from what I've experienced with you. And I look forward to, getting to know you better. It's like I tell people on this podcast, I'm not looking to make fishing buddies. I'm actually looking to make friends, fishing friends, so that we can do life and things from there. So if people ever need something, they can reach out to me and vice versa. And we actually build some type of relationship from there.
That's awesome. And I think hands down one of my favorite things about being a fly shop owner and being really involved in Trout Unlimited and things is just the angling community that we forge. Bellingham, Whatcom County, Skagit County. It's a really cool area that's a bit smaller than the big city life down in
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, and so it's not uncommon you run into people whether you're out fishing or you're hanging out, having some beers in town, and just a lot of like-minded people that care a lot about our fish and our fisheries up here, and yeah, it's a great place to be. I do have to correct you. You said
Yeah.
I had owned a fly shop for 30 years.
Uh huh.
I'm not that old. We've had the shop. I
Well, been
feel
fly
like
fishing for over 30 years. I
I've been fly
apologize.
fishing for over 30 years, but
Yes.
this is our 10-year anniversary for the Confluence Fly Shop
Oh, nice.
this year. So um, yeah, it's super cool. But yeah, I've actually, God, if I do the math, I don't think I've updated my bio on our website, but I've been fly fishing for almost 40 years now,
Okay.
uh, which is most of my life, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Like, how old were you and when you first got into fly fishing, and what was it that got you into it?
So it was just before my 12th birthday, and I had dabbled a little bit in spin fishing. I just had this natural kind of interest and curiosity, and you and I talked about this briefly on the phone the other day, but didn't necessarily have like a parent that fly fished or was super into it. It's
Mm-hmm.
just something that I really wanted to kind of pursue. My dad didn't fish, my mom didn't fish, but I happened to be on a hike with my mom up in the Alpine Lakes Wilderness, just east of Seattle, off of I-90,
Yep.
and we hiked up to a lake. I think it was Malacqua Lake, and I saw some guy on the other side of the lake just standing on a rock, fly casting,
Mm.
and I mean, he was just brailing out fish, catching trout after trout. And in my young mind, I somehow kind of naively got the impression that fly fishing was the way to catch fish, and that was the most effective and the best way to do it. And I think in retrospect, in that environment, it probably was. The trout were coming up and eating terrestrials and the few midges that were hatching on the surface. He was fishing a dry fly, um, and probably more effective than say something like power bait on those particular fish. But I was just mesmerized, and I had a birthday coming up, and I begged my mom. I said, I really want to learn how to fly fish. Um, how can I do this? And we found there was a fly shop in downtown Renton at the time where I grew up.
Mm,
Long since gone, but yeah, she took me down to the Royal Coachman fly shop, and I got a rod and reel, just a cheap little 5 weight Cortland kit,
nice.
and took a few casting classes and was on my way. We were right up the hill from the Cedar River, so
Oh,
did a
cool.
lot of my early fly fishing there. Fished the Snoqualmie and the Green, and it was really interesting in that time. I kind of feel like I very much learned in a vacuum. I didn't
Mm,
have a lot of other friends that did it. And so was kind of self-taught on a lot of things. It's not like today where anything you could possibly want to learn, you can go on YouTube and see a video or find all sorts of resources to help you out. So um, I feel very, very blessed these days to have such a strong angling community, and um, the teaching aspect, and helping others to learn and progress and get passionate about fly fishing is become one of my favorite things.
yeah, and if I remember correctly, you went to WWU and
Yes,
had you taught there and you did a little bit of English and writing.
I was an English and English writing major. And then I moved back down to the Seattle area for several years. Decided I didn't really like what I was doing. I was working in the tech industry,
Hmm.
and ended up going back to school and getting my teaching certificate. Um, and then, like a lot of people that go to Western Washington University, I had fallen in love with Bellingham, and I always kind of had it in the back of my mind that I would I would return to Bellingham at some point. So I brought my wife up here. Um, she fell in love with it as well, and we ended up settling in, bought a house. I substitute taught a bunch while I was up here, and then uh, kind of met a few people. Uh, Worked for Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association for several years, and then also uh, met a guy named Ed McGill, who had a guide business. I started kind of guiding here and there for him on the Skagit and a little bit over on the Olympic Peninsula,
Okay.
the Yakima, and then we started a fly shop together. And he's since moved on. I've been the sole proprietor for about 9 years, but yeah, that's kind of the progression and the story.
Is that how you got into the Confluence Fly Shop? Was through that path there?
Through that connection. Yeah, had started out guiding, and then opened the retail business several years after that, and I just fell in love with the fly shop community. um,
Hmm.
it's it may be the one and only job I've ever had where, like, I look forward to going to work every day.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah, it's a cool place. You get to know your customers after a while. I mean, we're even though we have rivers like the Skagit that are pretty well known. I wouldn't necessarily say like Bellingham or the Bellingham area is like a destination fishery where people come from all over the world anymore. So we kind of have a community fly shop where we see a lot of the same people week in and week out. And so you get to know people over time. And it's been a lot of people that, started out coming as a customer, and we got to know each other, and now we fish together, and we're great friends. So it's really cool how, one thing leads to another, and you get to know people.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you obviously know him, but he's a good friend of mine, Jordan Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I found out about you guys was from Jordan. Shout out to Jordan. What's up, buddy? Miss you. But Jordan's had nothing but nice things to say about you guys and how you guys have helped him out, by, talking about his guide business and everything from there. And
Yeah.
that guy's just a solid guy, super great guy.
He really is. I mean, I don't think I've known him more than a year or so, maybe a little over a year, but I mean, right off the bat, um, his passion and his level of energy just really stood out to me.
Hmm.
It's it's really cool when you see that same excitement that you have in yourself reflected in somebody else, and so immediately I knew I'm gonna like this guy. And
Yeah.
uh, um, he was really wanting to kind of get into the industry and start guiding. He's uh, helped us out a lot with our we have a Trout Unlimited chapter up here, the North Sound chapter of Trout Unlimited.
Hmm.
um, and he just wants to be more and more involved, so I've had him out on a spawner survey with me. And I think that's going to be a regular thing. So super fun guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's really cool. Talk to me about guiding. How long did you guide for? And
I
what river?
guided for on and off for about 6 years.
Okay.
Um, and there was a lot that I loved about it. I mean, certainly, making those connections with people, and being able to have repeat clients, and watch people grow and develop over time as an angler was something that I really enjoyed.
Mm.
Um, but I also got to be really frustrated with it, largely because I would say more than half of my guiding was focused on our local rivers here, like the Skagit and the Nooksack,
Mhm.
um, and the North Fork of the Stillaguamish.
Mm.
And about that time, we were starting to just lose a lot of our fisheries and our seasons, and it became frustrating when you didn't know from one year to the next if we would even have a spring steelhead fishery on the Skagit. And so trying to manage a business around that, and actually be able to book trips and still be at home for dinner with your family every night was becoming less and less of a reality.
Yeah.
And then I think the other half of it too, I realized, as much as I love watching somebody catch their first steelhead, and
Mm.
passing on some local knowledge of rivers and things like that, I also really like to fish myself, and guiding is not fishing. If you have a really skilled angler that that can cast well, can read water well, and you can put them in the right spots, on some level you can kind of share the experience vicariously through them. But a lot of times you're helping out new anglers that haven't developed that set of skills yet, and going out and being able to find a steelhead in this day and age, with the amount of pressure that we have on our rivers, the short limited seasons, I kind of decided, when I'm on the water, I prefer to be out fishing, versus helping somebody else to do it. I don't envy guys like Jordan that are just getting into it now,
Mhm.
because the shape of our fisheries in the Puget Sound area is much different than it was 15 years ago.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Like I, alluded to in the introduction, you have a very special niche that I just think is amazing. I mean, you've teamed up with Bill, who's been doing surveying on the Skagit River systems and the tributaries for um, you guys had a presentation about a month ago up in Bellingham to kind of pay tribute to him, and kind of the way I interpreted it and saw it was kind of the passing the torch from Bill to you, and now you're taking it over, and kind of talk to us about how the relationship formed with you and Bill, and how the surveying how you got into the surveying, and about the surveying and what you guys are doing. And
Sure.
I think it's such a cool thing. There's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, it's an awesome experience that I absolutely love. I met Bill about 11 years ago, through some mutual friends, and we've talked on and off. He is really one of the most unique people
Mm.
I've ever met. The guy knows more about the history and the science of uh, steelhead in Washington State and throughout the West Coast than I think definitely anybody I've ever met. And so for somebody like myself that's always curious about the natural world and curious about learning more about the fish that we go out and pursue. It was just fascinating to have a conversation with him and, and just find how much he knew. Um, and in the same stretch, I was also kind of looking for a way to still remain connected to steelhead, but with
Mm.
fewer and fewer opportunities to actually fish for them. Kind of strike a balance so that they could still be a huge part of my life. I mean, if we're talking 15 years ago, I fished for steelhead 11 months out of the year.
Wow.
May was the only month that I wasn't all in on steelhead, and it was very feasible to do that. I'd fish the North Fork of the Stillaguamish and the Skykomish a little bit all summer long into fall, and then we would transition into our early wild winter steelhead. I'd spend time over on the Olympic Peninsula. Um, all of our Puget Sound or our North Sound rivers, like the Sky, the Stilly, the Skagit, Sauk, and Nooksack, had seasons that ran at least into mid March, if not through the end of April. And so much of my time with steelhead was out, you know, trying to swing one up on a fly.
Yeah.
Um, anymore, we just don't have that opportunity in those seasons, and so being able to get out and walk the creeks and look for steelhead and um, spot fish, catalog like all the reds we found. I never really thought I would have the same passion about doing that as I do going out and catching a steelhead.
Mm.
I was a little skeptical that it would come anywhere near the experience of hooking and playing a steelhead and getting to watch it, swim away in this wild river where he found it. And I've actually found like the spawner surveys are almost more exciting. I mean, for one, if you look at the amount of pressure that the few rivers that are open these days receives. I mean, go look at the North Fork of the Nooksack right now, and it's absolutely insane.
That's
Like
what I've heard.
you will see, um, you go to the launch, and there's 20 or 30 vehicles parked there, and
Oh,
this is
wow.
not a big river, um, and it just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Complete other end of the spectrum, I went out and Surveyed 3 of the 5 tributaries to the Skagit we survey on Friday. Didn't see another soul. You're
Mm,
completely alone. Um, it's and when you do find a red that wasn't there the week before, or even better yet, see actively spawning steelhead, in that moment you're seeing something that very few people will ever see or experience. And
yes.
I've often described like the spawner surveys as kind of it's like an elaborate Easter egg hunt. Uh,
That's good.
and I think for anybody that spent a lot of time out uh, swinging flies for steelhead, it's also much the same way. Like you're fishing a lot of water that doesn't have any fish in it, and you're kind of looking for that one, and you're covering as much water as you conceivably can in a day, and then eventually, if you're lucky, you find one. And yeah, the spawner surveys are much the same way. And it's really cool going to these same areas over and over again, and watching the seasonal changes.
Mhm.
um, you'll see the creek levels come up, they'll go back down, and you become very adept at picking out something that wasn't there the last time you visited it. And like we found Friday, we found a mystery skeleton of clearly a carnivore. It had some menacing teeth, but we couldn't quite figure out what it was. And then in looking at it and again, I'm like, that's got to be a river otter. And, like I've never found a river otter skull on a creek, and it wasn't there 2 weeks ago when I last walked that area. So
When you say river otter, are you just referring to like a fish that's died and it's rotted?
no, or a river otter,
Oh,
like
river otter. Sorry,
yeah, like
it's my first day listening.
yeah. um, so we see river otters from time to time, when you're fishing or out surveying, but I've never found a dead one. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's kind of what I really like is being able to go back and sort of put together the story. I mean, you're not on the creek 24/7 watching things unfold, but when you survey in increments of 10 to 14 days, you're going to see changes. A really dynamic creek system like Finney Creek, the creek itself will completely reroute, sometimes several times within the season with every high water event. And there are others that, like O'Toole Creek, that every rock is right where it was last season. It doesn't change very often because of the size of the floodplain and the makeup of the creek. But it's it's neat to go out there and try to put together the story of what's happening when you're not there, just based on the things you're finding on the survey.
Yeah, I would imagine too, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that as somebody who's doing surveying, like you said, you kind of get to see the story, but I would imagine that that's given you a lot of knowledge in helping you with your angling, career too, as far as understanding like what waters maybe steelhead will be in, how they behave, and how they act. Does that kind of transition over into actually swinging for steelhead and help you out with that skill set a
It
little bit?
It does a little bit. One of the things you really begin to understand is the correlation between water temperature and how fish are migrating, or at what point they're actually potentially um, getting interested in spawning and things like that. Most steelhead spawning will occur when the water is like 44 degrees.
Okay.
Um, which nothing really is that temperature right now here in early February. But we're starting to see we'll see it as low as around 41 degrees.
Mm,
And I think I had 42.5 and 42 degrees on a couple of creeks
okay.
the other day. So it's like, okay, things could be happening right now. But steelhead, like any other fish that are cold blooded, um, you realize they're not often covering 20 miles of river a day when the water is 34 degrees.
Mm,
Right. I had a survey about a week and a half ago up on Upper Finney Creek. The water was 32 and a half degrees. So it's
wow.
half a degree above freezing.
Yeah, right.
Fish aren't doing much other than just hunkering down in those water conditions. Um, and understanding too, like um, as somebody that swings flies, uh, having realistic expectations about how far a fish is physically going to be able to move to take a swung fly. That window becomes very, very small when the water is that cold. Like as much as a fish might see your fly in clear water, 10, 20 feet away, and you love the idea that this fish is gonna like move that far to take it. That's not realistically going to be the case. They might have every intention of crushing that fly, um, that they see from far off, but their metabolism is so slow.
Mm.
You got to put it like literally right in their face, for them to react to it.
Yeah, that's good. And you touched on, you said a key word that stands out to me is expectations.
Yeah,
I think as anglers, and you can speak more about this as a, guide's point of view also, is that a lot of people that are coming into this sport, me included, I think I had a little bit of unrealistic expectations. What advice would you give the newest person and maybe even the intermediate person? What would kind of be a good expectation for people when they go out and they're swinging flies for steelhead as far as what kind of day to expect?
yeah. That's a really great question, Paul. I I would say on the one hand, set your expectations low. Like realistic. I'll tell you what my expectations are anymore for me personally. My goal, um, given our normally very short seasons, I mean, we realistically we might have a, a month of legitimate opportunity in North Puget Sound to target steelhead. Uh,
Mm,
when they're fishing the river's in shape and all that. My personal goal is I want to get one wild steelhead on a swung fly in a season, um, which you might say is not a very high goal. Some years like this year, it's going to be a stretch to make that happen.
I bet.
Um, with as short as the season's proving to be. Other years, I think last year I hooked six.
Oh, wow.
Got three the year before, so it fluctuates. Um, and that's with a lot of time doing it. I used to think, I'd hook a steelhead about every 2 to 3 trips. Um, Back in the day where we had considerably more fish than we do right now. Um, I would say in terms of swinging flies, like a couple of tips I could give right now is
Yeah.
don't try not to listen to what everybody's saying about where all the fish are stacked up. That's where everybody is. As somebody swinging flies for steelhead, um, you need to find a fish that has not been pounded day in, day out, or caught multiple times. You need to find a fish that's rested and aggressive and your fly may be the first thing it's seeing that's kind of in its face and bothersome on its upstream journey to spawn. So um, fish where other people aren't fishing. Be willing to walk. Find your own water. Get away from people. Not only will you potentially find fish that are more apt to bite a fly, but you'll also enjoy the experience a lot more than fishing around a whole bunch of other people. I mean, the reality is you're asking so much of a fish to make that move and move a foot vertically in the water column or move out of its way to take a fly. Uh, Somebody drifting a bead or a jig under a float, or just about any other method of fishing, you're able to put that right in the fish's face to the point where all it really has to do is decide to open its mouth or not open its mouth. Um, and so you're really at a disadvantage in catching fish. But I would definitely impress upon people that steelheading isn't a numbers game, nor should it be. It's not about going out and saying, I stuck 20 steelhead this weekend, or I've caught 80 fish this season. They're a really special creature. There aren't nearly as many of them around as there once were, and appreciate the experience for what it is. If you get one fish, even if you don't land the fish, pat yourself on the back for not only just finding a fish, but finding a fish that was willing to move for a swung fly, and learn to enjoy the other things. I think probably my favorite thing about uh, pursuing steelhead and swinging flies for steelhead is the pace at which you move. I mean, I fish for all sorts of things. I love to fly fish for trout, bass, uh, do a fair amount of saltwater flats fishing. It's awesome. All of it is exciting. But one of the things that steelheading forces you to do is totally slow way down. I mean, when you're swinging a run that, if we're talking a river like the size of the Skagit, some of those runs might be a quarter mile long or longer. And you're literally taking, a couple steps downriver after every swing. It might take you half a day to fish some pieces of water. You're not you're not running and gunning and all over the map. So when you slow down and you fish at a pace like that, you start to notice things. You notice, the eagle flying overhead. You notice the family of river otters like swimming down the river. Um, you notice things like, oh, the salmonberry bushes that were bleak and barren last week now have little pink buds on them. Um, and there's definitely a parallel. I'm noticing the same types of things when I'm surveying for steelhead reds, because you're moving at a slower pace so that you don't miss anything. Um, Sometimes the steelhead red, if it's a day or two old, it'll stick out like a sore thumb. It literally glows in the water, and you would have to be blind or like totally inattentive to miss it. Other times they're going to be a lot more subtle, and if there's been a high water event, some of that red might be smoothed out or be a little obscured by sediment. um, in late spring, when we see a lot of steelhead spawning activity, algae grows fairly quickly. So
Mm.
a fresh red, there won't be any algae on the rocks and it'll stick out from everything around it. Um, but if it's a week old or more, that algae will have started to repopulate, and you might miss it. So just move at a slow pace. And it's also relaxing. There is a definitely a Zen like quality um, to going out and fishing that way. Um, My favorite thing about it is, it doesn't matter what else is going on in the rest of your life. Uh, you know what sort of stress you're dealing with at work or in relationships or with kids or any of that, it all disappears when you're out on the river. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's such a huge draw for the people that go out and spend their time doing that.
Yeah, I totally relate to you on that because um, like that's something I've really been trying to answer the question to myself about what is it about fishing that, you really like. I mean, for me, I'm not out there catching tons of fish. Like I'm still very new in my spay fishing, journey. And for me, I enjoy being out there. Like I love floating down the river in a raft. And like you said, it gives you that opportunity to where you can stop and you look around as you're out there early in the morning before the sun comes up. You get to see you're waking up, I feel like, with the day to where you
Yeah.
get to see it transition into morning and afternoon and dusk and dark. You get to see those beautiful mountains like on like the Skagit River, and if you're on the upper section and you get to see everything change as you're floating down and you go one bend to another and you go to the lower section and there's just big mountains as you look back up. And that's the thing that gets me giddy about it is just being around that and feeling like you're a part of that ecosystem. You're a part of that environment. Like you said, you can take a look around and you can hear the bald eagles chirping. You can see them. You can see a black bear or two, or the family of deer that are coming down. It's just, I totally relate to that because it totally melts everything away that's going on in life. And I think that, like, my wife and I, she did a episode with me just a little bit ago of where her perspective of coming into it and not fully getting into it yet. Like she hasn't picked up a spay rod yet, but she's gone out with me a couple times. And just to hear the perspective that she has as the newest person getting involved in it and how she connects to the wild and the wilderness from there. And the understanding that she has with me and the grace that she gives me to go out there. Like she'll say to me sometimes, "Hey, you're getting a little moody. Why don't you go fishing?" And I'm like, "No, babe, like we got to take care of this and that." And she's like, "No, Paul, really, I need you to get out there because it's what you love." And I'm like, "Okay, I appreciate it. And I thank you that you understand that about that for me." So yeah, I totally relate to that. That's good. And I appreciate all that insight there.
Yeah, that's very, very well stated. I couldn't agree more. And I it sounds like too, we both had the good fortune to marry the right woman because my wife is very
Amen to
much
that.
the same way. And my wife does not fish.
Hmm,
She's been with me a handful of times in the 20 years that we've been married, but it's just not her thing. But she recognizes what it does for me,
good.
and can call out those moments where it's obvious I need a tune up and an attitude adjustment.
Yeah, yeah, right. Me
And
too.
there's no better way to reset yourself and put the rest of the world um, in perspective, than going out and fishing or hiking
Mhm.
or just being finding that connection with the natural world, because it's unfortunate. I grew up in an era where we didn't really have video games and computers and cell phones and social media and all of those distractions that take you away from the outside world around you. um so my childhood was spent like playing in the swamps and collecting frog eggs and watching them develop into tadpoles and then frogs. And it's sad to me that there's a lot of generations in this day and age that don't have that connection to the outdoors. um and it's so easy to get away from. And I love nothing more than going somewhere where I don't get a signal on my phone.
Me too.
I gotta put it away for the day. And um, as much as we get attached to those things, you come to realize like the world doesn't end if you don't get to check your text messages for 10 hours or whatnot.
Yeah.
um life goes on, and I think it's really important for all of us to be a part of the natural world and experience all the different cycles of life that are going on out there.
Yeah, the only time, to be fair, when I'm on my phone is I really like to document my stuff when I'm out there. It's kind of like my own video library. So I'll do like some Instagram reels, or I'll put together like a little YouTube video from there and put it on my page. It's kind of my quote unquote logbook where I can look back and I can share it with friends or family members, or the newest person getting in. I can be, hey, look at this. I was on my raft the other day floating through this, and look, and they're like, whoa, look at that water. I was always afraid of going out there because I thought it would like tip the boat over, but you're in that in your raft. I'm like, yeah, man. They're like, yeah, I want to go out sometime. Absolutely. That's part of the
Yeah.
reason I got a raft that's a two-person one. I have a little Outcast Striker, and
Okay.
love that thing. It's a self-bailing raft, extra seat. And I picked up a extra pair of waders that are just like $30 from Amazon. So
Yeah.
the newest person wants to get involved, like, I got a handful of rods and the gear. And if they want to come out and experience it, I have the stuff that they can go out and do it. And it amazes me the conversations I get into with people out on the river. Like there was one person, he was a gear guy, but again, I gave him a spay rod to try it out and he picked it up right away. But the conversations we've gotten into out there on the river, like he was telling me how there was a dark time he was going on in his life, and he had tried to commit suicide, and he stuck one bullet in the chamber and put it right to the hammer, pulled the trigger, and it had the dimple in the bullet, but it never went off. And I was like, wow. And it just, to me, the reason I share that story is because that might not have ever been able to be shared with him, with anybody else, but because he's in an environment where he feels comfortable and at peace. And like you said, everything else melts away. You get to take off all that fluff and all, the masks that we wear in the world. It just kind of is a veil that's lifted up, and you get to be open and authentic, because as guys, it's very challenging for us to be vulnerable, especially to other men, and to open up about life challenges, mental challenges from there. And that's what I really love, like you said, about the community, because you get to know these people and you already have a common interest there, and people start to feel comfortable and they can open up about things that they probably would never open up. And you hear so many stories about people that have committed suicide, and you hear that they were like the happiest person and the most joyful person everybody loved to be around. Unfortunately, the most recent story that comes to my mind is, I don't know if you know who this guy is, but he was the co-host on Ellen DeGeneres' show. His name is Twitch, and
Mhm.
he was just one of the most upbeat guys. And about 2 months ago, he had committed suicide, and they found a letter in his hotel. And when people that know who he is and seen him, you would look at him and go, "Oh my gosh, that guy! He was the most upbeat, positive person, and all he was happy." And maybe all he needed was an outlet to share his feelings and his emotions with somebody or something. And yeah, I can't say enough about what fishing has done for me as a person, and what I've seen it do to other people in the fishing community too.
Yeah. Yeah. It has just such a phenomenal healing power. I mean,
Mm,
I I've had my struggles, growing up with anxiety and depression, and I think fishing in so many respects has saved my life over and over again, because it is just
Mm.
it's at the center of the universe. And it's kind of funny to me, because here we are having this conversation about um uh like fishing and its ability to to reset you and ground you and put life in perspective. And we've talked very little about like the fish themselves.
Yeah.
Uh, like, and I think most people that really get into fishing, realize somewhere down the road that, yeah, that's the initial spark that sort of drives you to go out there. But the fish themselves are almost superfluous to uh, why you're really going. Especially this time of year. I mean, it's like going out and swinging winter steelhead on the fly. Uh, Most of the time, you're not touching anything. It's kind of skunking after skunking, and but I still keep going, and I absolutely cherish the experience to be out there. At the end of the day, it's not really about the fish you catch. It's about the process, and the process is the part that I really enjoy. And yeah, absolutely. At some point, you want to connect with something. You want to experience the thrill and the adrenaline rush of 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 catching and releasing a beautiful native wild creature.
Yeah.
Um, but you learn to go out there and do it anyway, um, because that's not really the ultimate reward. It's just sort of our excuse to go do it. um,
Yeah. I have a friend of mine named David. He's on Instagram, left coast or left side, I believe it is. Sorry, David, if I butchered that, buddy.
left coast spay.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I met him at Spayapalooza
Yes.
last May.
Yeah. He put it very well because we all did a podcast over on a good friend of mine named Andrew at Dead Drifter Society. Shout out to him. But David had said that when he's out fishing, catching a fish is just the reward on top of everything else that he's experienced out there. And I thought about that. I was like, that's good. I kind of think about it like, you have like a Sunday, right? And the cherry's just kind of the bonus, but everything else you're having is, that substance that helps you. Like you said, we haven't talked a whole lot about the fish themselves because that's kind of the byproduct of what gets us out there when we really dig down to the root of it. We're really out there to release everything and be around that environment and just if you're not catching fish, you're having a good day of practicing your casting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember who it was, but years ago, um, somebody gave me the best advice, um, that has stuck with me for since that moment. And I think this is something that's really critical to pass on to new people,
Good.
as far as adjust your expectations and the way you measure success.
Good.
Um, if you, particularly when it comes to swinging flies for steelhead, first off, accept that you've chosen the hardest, most unrealistic way to potentially catch a steelhead that there is. So don't beat yourself up when you don't catch fish every time you go. But instead of measuring success in terms of like the size or the numbers of fish caught, um, the one goal that I set for myself every time I go fishing, whether it's for steelhead or anything else, is did I learn something new?
It's good.
And that could be large or small. It could be I learned a new knot to use to tie my fly on. Um, I think of that years ago. I learned how to tie a turtle knot, which is kind of a more traditional uh, connection for like a classic up eye steelhead hook.
Okay.
Um, or maybe you learn a new access point. You learn how
Mhm.
to get to water that you've not fished in the past. Or you saw a plant or a mushroom or something that you didn't recognize, and you went home and looked it up and found out what it was. You're coming away that much more knowledgeable about the environment you're fishing in, and in my eyes, that's a success. You may not have touched a fish all day long,
Yeah.
but you you're coming away smarter than you were when you entered into it, and so that's again a success. um and I think that's an achievable goal no matter who you are or where you're fishing. And yeah, it pains me to see we get customers coming into the shop that sometimes are really down on themselves. They're like, I've been swinging flies for steelhead for 3 years and I still haven't caught one.
That's
And
me.
yeah, and it's really like I'm a loser and I don't know how to fish. And it's like, no, like I mean, I started steelheading in the early 90s. And
Okay.
at that point, I didn't have like resources online to pull from. There were a few decent books out there that I kind of poured through over and over again to try to glean some knowledge, but I didn't have a mentor or anybody that knew what they were doing that I was fishing with. So it took me 5 years before I landed my first steelhead. And that was at a time when steelhead were considerably more prolific than they are right now. And there was a lot less pressure. Um, but I'll tell you what, like that first summer steelhead that I picked up in the Snoqualmie River after all those years of trying and being frustrated with it, like that that made my world. I
I
mean,
bet.
I rode that high for a year. and and the other thing of it is too, like part of what makes steelheading so difficult is that you don't have a lot of validation.
Mm,
In other walks of life, like say trout fishing, uh, if it takes you 3 years to catch your first trout, yeah, you probably do suck as an angler. Not
Gee,
to
thanks,
not to be
Scott.
mean
Appreciate it.
or rude, but uh, or you're doing something grossly wrong, and
Right.
with a little help from a guide or somebody else, I think you could turn that around really quickly. But steelheading often there's a lot of times where I'll watch somebody fish. I'll go out with somebody that hasn't caught a fish and I'll fish with them, and I'm watching their approach and how they're slowing down the swing of their fly, how they're presenting, the sink tip they're choosing to use, the flies they're choosing to use. And it's so difficult to I watch them and I'll tell them you are doing everything exactly right.
Good.
And it's a reality that you could do everything right the majority of the time and still not catch fish.
Yes.
You just don't get a lot of feedback. I mean, normally if you do things right, you get rewarded. If you do them wrong, you don't catch any fish. And steelheading is certainly a pursuit where you could do things really right. You just don't happen to be on the run the day you've got a pot of fish coming through. Um, steelhead are relatively easy to catch. There just aren't that many of them. I mean,
Mm.
compared to just about every species of salmon, they're far more aggressive. They want to eat a fly. They want to just crush whatever's in their face. They don't care what color it is. They're they're
Yeah.
they're really forgiving. You just got to find them, and so often they're just not there. So um, That's what makes it difficult.
That's good. And I love what you said about if you see somebody on the river, you know, like for me, again, being kind of new into the industry, like 2 years, if somebody came along the side of me and was like, hey man, just want to give you a pat on the back and let you know that, I see you out here, casting and not catching anything, but you're doing the right thing. For
Mhm.
me, that will bring me confidence in my own self, going, hey, you know what? I know as long as I'm dialed in and based on what conditions, flows, and sink tips that I'm doing, but as long as I know that I'm doing what's right, it's only a matter of time. And
Yeah.
I remember hearing uh Jocko, the Navy SEAL guy, somebody had asked him, if he ever knew he was going to quit or if he was going to finish the SEAL program. And he said, "Oh, absolutely, I knew I was going to finish it." He said, "Because the only way you don't pass the SEAL program is if you quit." And he said, "I know I'm not a quitter. I knew what I was doing was right. And I knew as long as I just saw it through." He said, "Yeah, it sucked. It was uncomfortable. I didn't like it. I had sand in every part of my body every time because of all the exercises we had to do. But I'm not a quitter." And I think about that for like, I always tell people I'm kind of like that Rudy character from the movie, right? Like, I
Hmm.
may not be the biggest guy, the fastest, the smartest, but I don't quit. I have that tenacity and I'm just a dog on a bone where I'm like, I'm gonna figure it out. And like you
Yeah.
said, there's mentors, there's people you can reach out to, and there's lots of resources. And that's what I love about hearing stories about fly shops, and I've heard them about your guys's where, I have a couple mutual friends that go in there and they're like, yeah, they do fly tying nights. They'll sometimes do spade casting, outings from there. And I get a lot out of that. I'm like, man, that's awesome that they do that. You
Yeah.
guys do that at your shop.
No, the best tool you can have in your toolbox in chasing steelhead is just persistence.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, the most expensive spay rod or the the hot fly or any of that. It's the willingness to fish a run, and then when you think you're done with the run, take another 10 steps down, because it's not uncommon. You'll fish what you think is the run, and then 10 steps down in the riffle of the tail out, you've got either a new fish coming up or a fish that's been pushed down low into the riffly water because of the amount of pressure on the river. um, or squeeze in another run. Don't pack it in because you're cold or you're wet or you're uncomfortable. Sometimes that decision to fish one more run, you found the one with fish in it, and um, just keep at it. Eventually, you'll be rewarded, and like we've talked about, recognize that the experience of being out there doing it is its own reward.
Yeah, that's good. I'm circling back to some of the stuff you said in the beginning on surveying because I'm taking notes here. But you talked about the cold, and I wanted to get your opinion on this because you guys survey this and you guys know kind of the health and the respectful way to handle fish. What's your opinion on gloves when handling fish?
Um,
Is it safe for them? Is it okay? Do you not
I
prefer that?
ideally it's better if you're gonna handle a fish or hold a fish for a grip and grin. Um, it's better to not be wearing anything abrasive on your hands. Bare hands or something like nitrile gloves
That's what I use. That's why I was
are,
asking.
yeah. I mean, we're humans. We are not cold blooded like the fish. We get pretty damn cold out there, and like me in particular, I'm the guy that really bundles up out there because I get cold easily. So nitrile gloves are absolutely critical.
You're awesome.
But if you're wearing like wool fingerless gloves
Mhm.
over those, or um, fleece gloves, or something. Take them off as you're landing the fish, or before you tail the fish. Um, fish have that slime coat, which is essentially their immune system. It's the barrier that that protects them from the introduction of germs and bacteria and things that can harm them. And if you grab them with a wool glove, like, even if you're just tailing them, you're going to take some of that slime coat off and potentially make them more vulnerable to the introduction of disease. Um, so I'm a huge fan. This last winter, I discovered, I think, one of the best warm, like, best techniques for keeping your hands warm. The nitrile gloves, absolutely. Um, it's amazing, just by keeping your hands dry, how much warmer you'll be, even though they don't really have the gloves themselves don't have really any sort of insulating property, other than keeping some heat from escaping from your hands. But I've
Yeah,
been putting over those. Sims makes a glove. It's called their Kispiox no finger glove,
I've seen that.
and it's a neoprene glove that, if I put that on over the nitrile glove, um, it doesn't have any finger holes to it or anything. It's just open, but it's got like a grid waffle fleece on the inside of it. Um, and I about a month ago, out fishing the Skagit, it was down in the 20s, like ice in the guides constantly, and I wore those and my hands were hot.
Nice.
And the beauty of those too is they're really easy. If you are landing a fish with those gloves on, you can actually fold them back out of the way, or
Whoa.
even just take them off altogether. And the other nice thing is too, if I've got the nitrile gloves on, if I tail a fish, if I get my hands in the water, my hands still aren't getting wet. I mean, there's nothing more miserable than, dipping a wool fingerless glove into the icy river, and then your hand is soaked after that, and
Or your sleeves.
or your sleeves.
Yeah,
And
I gotta show you this real
yeah,
quick before I forget, because you're talking about sleeves. Um, they make these sweatshirts here. I don't know if you've seen these, but I always butcher the name. Um, but it's MAL. I know you can't see it. I'll put a link in the description.
yeah,
They make these sweatshirts where the sleeve, it's neoprene, the whole thing. So as you put your hand in the water, it actually doesn't ride up the cuff link, and it'll keep your sleeves dry from there.
yeah, that's huge.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry. I
Yeah,
wanted to just share that with you.
no, that's really good, because getting back to that tenacity and persistence
Mm-hmm.
of being out there, and being able to push yourself to continue to swing flies under the worst of conditions. A huge part of that is being able to be as comfortable as you can possibly be, and certainly in the outdoor clothing world, the technology exists to be pretty darn comfortable out there,
Yeah.
and not have to be miserable. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap this up in a little bit here because I know you
Sure.
have plans, but I do want to talk to you about um, experiences that people can kind of expect when they come to your shop. Like, someone's coming in and they're like, "Hey, Scott, I want to get into steelheading on a spey rod. What what rod, what setup, what kind of flies? What would you recommend for the newest person that is either listening or when they come into your shop? What do you like to set people up with?"
Yeah. So, one thing we pride ourselves on at the Confluence is really being pretty approachable.
That's
I
true.
grew up in an era where it wasn't uncommon. You'd walk into certain fly shops and you get the stink eye from the guy behind the counter, like you were interrupting their coffee break, or you weren't cool enough to warrant their time or a discussion. I mean, we love to talk fishing and fish and are very passionate, and people getting into it are kind of our bread and butter. That's what keeps us afloat as a business. um I would say first and foremost, like, don't expect that we're going to try to sell you the most expensive rod and reel combo right off the bat. Don't get me wrong, as a business, we love it when people spend money. But we're also realistic that um uh there are a lot of options at a lot of price points out there that'll get the job done. And the reality is, spending 3 grand on a spay outfit is not going to catch you any more fish than spending $500. So we have a lot of we figure there's a lot of outfits kind of entry level from Redington or from Echo that are quite serviceable and well designed, that will get you into the game without breaking the bank. Um, Rather than having the most expensive rod out there, I think some of the important considerations are getting a line system that is balanced to the rod and is going to work well for you as a caster. Um, that's hugely important. And then also leaving some room in your budget to have a variety of sink tips. Really, that even more so than the fly, having a line system that will put your fly at the level of or near the level of where the fish are in a given piece of water is, like, realistically one of the most important things. And if you go out, like, I know a lot of guys that just run out and they're like, oh, I'll get one sink tip, and it's like 10 feet of T14 or 10 feet of T11. That's great. And that's a relevant sink tip that I will fish a lot in the winter. But if you're on a medium paced flat on the Skagit that's 3 or 4 feet deep, and you throw that tip on, you're gonna hang up left and right. And if you're, there used to be an old adage that if you're not losing flies, you're steelheading. And I think that's been kind of rewritten and revised over the year. Like, in my mind, if you're just losing flies constantly, you're not fishing. You're
Right.
probably presenting your fly below the fish. They're not seeing it, and you're spending a bunch of money or a bunch of your time on lost flies. So, um, yeah, having a sink tip that'll get you down, but isn't hanging up constantly. I usually recommend having at least 3 tips to cover different types of water. And I really like the way like OPST has broken it down on their tips. They have lots of different lengths and grain weights of sink tips that'll match just about any system you're fishing, whether you're using a trout space setup or something more like a 13-foot 7 weight, kind of a more traditional all around winter steelhead spay rod. But they label them riffle, run, and bucket, which I think, even if you don't know a lot about um, sink rates and what's appropriate for what situation, yeah, perfect. Um, that in the riffle, the water is going to be at its shallowest, and you're probably going to want a lighter tip. If you go through with the same tip that's designed to sink your fly quickly and deeply in the bucket or the deepest part of the run, you're just going to hang up constantly, and you're not going to be able to present your fly. Um, likewise, their run is suitable for everything but the deepest part of the run, and it's a nice concept that I think makes it understandable to even a beginner. um so we're going to focus on sink tips. That being said, in terms of like, if you're getting into steelhead, usually one of our first questions when anybody is buying new equipment is, what are you going to use it for? What rivers do you fish? Or if you don't want to tell us what rivers you fish, that's totally fine. But give us an idea. The rod that's ideal for a river the size of the North Fork of the Nooksack may not be the rod you want if you're spending most of your time down on the Skagit, a bigger, broader river like that. So in general, we sell a lot of, like, for first spay rod setups, a 13-foot 7 weight is is an excellent kind of jack of all trades. That'll give you a lot of versatility to fish a lot of different water.
That's what I have.
Um, yeah, and we sell more Echo rods than anything. I mean, as a company, Echo is just absolutely fantastic when it comes to warranty fulfillment. They design a very fishable, very castable rod, without costing you an arm and a leg. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
Echo
know that
was
when you come into the shop, it doesn't. I don't care if you've never wet a line in your life, or if you've been at it for years. We're it's just me and Brandon Sly at the shop, and we are generally going to be two of the most approachable guys you've ever met. We don't have a lot of pretense, and we're just happy to talk fishing, and we're excited that you're excited, and we're going to send you down the right path.
yeah, that's good. And again, I just want to echo the, approaching you guys, I want to thank you publicly for coming on here because I'm brand new at this.
Yeah,
You're my second guest, and for you to take the time out of your schedule and to spend time with me and everybody else out there, I greatly appreciate that and the knowledge and the information there.
yeah. No, it's I love to talk about what I do, and I love to talk about um our fish and conservation, and get more people excited about that. I mean, the reality of it is the fish need us as much as we need them.
It's
And
good.
so I'm a firm believer that as an angler, you should be putting back at least as much as you're taking out. And I'm not talking necessarily harvesting fish or anything like that. I just think that in this day and age, um, there are a lot of threats that exist to our fish. Whether it's something like the proposed pebble mine up in Bristol Bay, or or a hydroelectric dam that doesn't have adequate fish passage. We need to be out there advocating for our fish, so that we potentially still have something to fish for and pursue down the road. Um, and to me, conservation is its own reward too. Like, you may start into it thinking, oh, I'm doing this great thing for the environment. I guarantee you'll walk away from a day of doing a spawner survey, or helping out with any other project, and be like, you know what, I got a lot out of that was really, really fulfilling for me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next time you guys are doing a survey, and I guess I'll, share this with everybody else too, is that you do allow other people to come with you and you have an email distribution list where you'll let people come with you. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I love having other people out. I've got several people. One guy in particular, Christian Herzberger, I mean, he's been with me on probably 80% of the surveys that
Wow.
I've done for Bill. And he's learned a lot. Like, he's the
Right.
guy. I'm If the river splits, I'm like, you walk that braid, I'll walk this one. And I know that if there's a red or something that needs to be identified in there, like, he's going to catch it. Um, And I love seeing people develop confidence and uh, be able to continue to do it. I generally, like, most of these areas that we survey are pretty small. I mean, some of the creeks you could jump across them at any point. So I try to manage it so that I'm bringing like a reasonable number of people on any given survey. Like, I don't want to march 20 guys down the creek. I mean, one, it makes it harder for me to give people individual attention and instruction and help them to learn more about what we're doing. It's nice to be able to carry a conversation the entire way, but um, we do enough surveys. I mean, I'm surveying from mid-January to mid-June,
Okay.
so we got 6 months in there, and that's ample opportunity. I don't know. My schedule's kind of all over the map. So sometimes I can do weekends. Oftentimes it's during the week, but we can usually find uh, a compromise that works to get people out there. Um, yeah, and it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Two last things, and I'll let
Yeah.
you go, Scott. I really wanted to ask you this, and I'm glad you mentioned reds again. Um, as far as like the ethical part of things, like when we see reds out there,
Mhm.
um, if you don't know what the red is, or you do know what the red is, can you kind of give like the newest people that don't know what a red looks like, kind of the
Sure.
safest way to navigate that to where they're not walking all over and what to look for, and and
Absolutely.
and the downside of what happens when people walk on them.
Yeah. Very good question. A red, whether it's a steelhead or a salmon, is basically going to have a similar composition. So it's got a big pit that so there's a noticeable depression in the river, and then if it's a relatively fresh red, like it's been constructed within a day or two, there will often be a pretty crisp edge to
Mm.
that that initial pit that you see, like a steep drop off into the red. Um, and then below that pit, you're going to have a tail spill. So what fish are doing is they are they are digging an initial pit, which is where their eggs are going to go. Um, they'll complete their spawning, and then once those eggs have been fertilized and deposited in that pit, the fish actually move upstream and then excavate another pit, and all the substrate that gets dislodged and moved downstream from the current in that upper pit is what's going to cover up the eggs down below. So where the actual eggs are not in the pit that you'll see for the red. They're actually under the tail spill or the mound below. So anytime you see something like that, um, I recommend, if you do need to wade or you're crossing the river or anything, um, if you can, make that crossing upstream of the red, because you don't necessarily know how far that red extends downstream and where those eggs are. You don't want to walk across on the mound. Um, those eggs are kind of loose in the gravel down below, and you run the risk, if you step on that mound, you're gonna crush eggs and potentially excavate some of them, or damage the red. So cross upstream, um, and then if you have the option in the area too, the eggs are usually going to be buried under like gravel or cobble, smaller substrate in the river. So if you're stepping on like large rocks or stones in the vicinity, you're not typically going to find eggs buried under those things because that larger substrate, fish just have a harder time moving that around with their tail.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it is very important to watch out for, and it's not uncommon. Like later in the spring, um, if we do have an opener on the Skagit, most of the surveys we're doing are we're surveying small streams that are all closed to fishing. Nobody's up there walking or wading around anyway, so those reds are relatively safe and protected. But there are fish that do utilize the main stem for spawning, and so be on the lookout, particularly as we get into um, April, late March and April. If the river's open, watch out for reds. Even when the river reopens in June, um, we have fish spawning in the Skagit in June, sometimes as late as July. It's not uncommon. We've got a uh, really broad run timing. So um, yeah, you should be on the lookout for reds at any time, and particularly in the fall when you've got a lot of salmon spawning activity.
That's good. No, I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to explain that, because I know for me, when I was in Sacramento, California, I fished the American River, and they had at the time the Nimbus Dam was there, and you could stand up and you could see the reds there, and they were out in the middle of the river because the water was so low. But so you kind of see what it is, but then you are going through the river and you'll walk across something and you're like, shoot, is that a red or not a red? And just common sense told me to just kind of, like you said, go upriver, steer clear of that, knowing that when that peak season is going to be, to where if you see a red, if there's still going to be, eggs or anything not there.
Mhm.
So just to be cautious there. So I'll end with this, Scott. Is there anything that you want to plug or something we
Yeah,
didn't get to that you want to
I
talk about?
I would add one more thing on the reds too. You'll
Uh-huh.
you'll often notice that a red is a lighter patch on the stream bottom. So because
Good.
fish are getting in there and excavating the gravel, any of the sediment or algae that might have previously been on the rocks is wiped clean. So they often, especially if they've been around for only a day or two, they're almost going to glow in the river. They're pretty hard to miss. So if you're noticing a sudden light spot in the bottom composition, um, go around it or go upstream of it to avoid potentially damaging it.
That's a good,
Um,
yeah, good catch on that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. What do you want to plug, or what do you want
I
to
would
mention that
say,
we didn't get to?
yeah, I want to give a shout out the Steelhead Spawner Survey uh, project. It's a continuation of something that Bill McMillan has been doing independently now for 14 some years,
Hmm.
and we're kind of I'm taking over, but I'm also doing it largely through our North Sound Trout Unlimited chapter.
Okay.
Um, Trout Unlimited is a great organization. There are a lot of really good organizations that protect our wild and native fish. But North Sound Trout Unlimited, if you happen to be in the North Sound area, we have a lot of cool events. Not the least of which is we'll have Spayapalooza again coming up in May,
That'll be fun.
and super great group of people,
It
and
is.
it's awesome to see the chapter uh, grow every year. We've got a lot of involvement from the public and a lot of interest from people in wanting to help us out with projects and help fund projects. Um, so you can find more about the chapter. Look up North Sound Trout Unlimited on Facebook, or northsoundtu.org is our website. See what we're doing. Um, and then yeah, I would also plug the Confluence Fly Shop newsletter.
Good.
That's where I put my English writing degree to use, and it's a pretty in-depth newsletter. You can sign up for it on our website. If you stop in the shop, you can ask us to add you. Yeah, it's just the confluenceflyshop.com is our website. And that will give you kind of an ear to the street and let you know everything that's going on as far as the events we're doing. I put a lot of the TU stuff in there as well, and fun things like we tie a different fly every month, and those videos are up on YouTube. But yeah, if you're in the area and you haven't been to the Confluence Fly Shop, certainly come in and say hi. We love to meet new people and grow the angling community. It's a lot of fun. So.
Awesome. And then if people want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can contact me through we got a contact form on the website,
Okay.
or my
Confluence.
email is just scott@theconfluenceflyshop.com. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me whether you've got a general fishing question or you're interested in helping out with the spawner surveys. um, I'm more than happy to help get you involved with that. Yeah.
Awesome.
And
Well,
I'd like
Scott,
to
go
thank you
ahead.
too, Paul. This has been I enjoy doing the podcasts. I can get kind of talkative and all over
No, I
the
love
map,
it.
but very passionate about fishing. You've asked some great questions today, and
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
excited to see your podcast grow and develop in time. I think it's a really cool medium, not just for the fishing community, but for other things too. I love listening to podcasts.
Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Again, I try to blend in some of the fishing aspect of it, some of the entrepreneur business side of things, but then also the life aspect of things also right there too.
Yeah.
Well, don't go anywhere, Scott. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for finding us here. We're on all the major platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever else you want to find your podcasts out there. Till next time, I'm going to tell everybody, make it a great day. Have a good Super Bowl Sunday, and we'll see you guys later.